Few people realize that the most dangerous weapon humans ever invented was not the spear, but the ability to throw. And yet, in the deep story of human evolution, the transformation of the human body into a living throwing machine is why we are the only surviving hominid on the planet. The important thing you thought you knew was that early humans survived because they walked upright, made tools, and slowly became smarter. But the deeper you look, the more that story changes. Walking upright freed the arms, yes, but freedom alone was not enough. The arm had to become fast. The shoulder had to become spring-loaded. The torso had to rotate. The legs had to grow longer, not just for walking across open ground, but for driving force upward through the body. And the hand, at the final instant, had to turn a stone, a handaxe, or a spear into something no other animal on Earth could match. A missile launched with intention, distance, force, and deadly accuracy. Something is wrong with the old picture of early humans as weak scavengers edging nervously around predators, waiting for scraps after lions and saber-toothed cats had finished feeding. The anatomy tells a harder story. These were not animals built only to run away. They were increasingly tall, long-legged, wide-shouldered, rotational creatures able to create speed through a chain of movement that began at the ground and ended at the fingertips. When a modern baseball pitcher steps forward, plants the lead foot, turns the hips, coils the torso, lets the arm lag backward, and then releases stored energy through the shoulder and elbow, he is performing a motion with roots far older than sport. The stadium mound is a late echo of a much older landscape, a slope above a watering place, a cave mouth above a trail, a cliff edge over a herd, or a raised bank where one human group faced another with stones in their hands. The answer was not simply strength. Chimpanzees are strong, gorillas are stronger. A large ape can throw an object, and anyone who has seen an angry chimpanzee fling a branch or a stone understands that the action itself did not begin with Homo sapiens. But the difference is speed, timing, and anatomical integration. Human throwing is not just an arm action, it is a full body sequence. The legs start it, the hips turn, the waist allows the chest to rotate separately from the pelvis, the shoulder stretches under torque, the elbow whips forward, the wrist finishes the motion, the projectile leaves the hand after energy has passed through the body like a wave. That wave is what changed everything. It turned a vulnerable primate into a predator, a defender, and eventually a competitor against other humans. Now consider this. Around 2 million years ago, the human body changed in a way that looks almost designed for throwing. Homo erectus was taller than earlier hominids, with longer legs, a more modern trunk, lower and broader shoulders, and a shoulder joint positioned in a way that allowed the arm to move through a much more effective throwing arc. This was not only a walker. This was not only a runner. This was a body that could take energy from a long stride, pass it through the hips and torso, store it briefly in the shoulder, then release it into a projectile. The new anatomy mattered because throwing is not powered by muscle alone. The shoulder works partly like a stretched elastic system. During the arm cocking phase, the upper arm rotates backward beyond what muscle power alone comfortably creates. Tendons, ligaments, and muscle tissues stretch. Then, in a few explosive milliseconds, that stored energy returns, accelerating the arm forward with astonishing speed. There is a thing that happens in a throw that is easy to miss because it happens too quickly for the eye to separate. The thrower steps toward the target, and as the foot strikes the ground, the body briefly resists itself. The torso is already turning forward, but the arm lags backward. That lag is not a mistake. It is the secret. The shoulder is being loaded, the elbow is bent, the hand is still behind the body, the chest opens, the upper arm rotates outward, and the soft tissues crossing the shoulder are stretched like a drawn cord. Then the sequence reverses. The torso has delivered its torque, the shoulder snaps into internal rotation, the elbow extends, the wrist finishes the path, the hand releases. In elite throwers, the internal rotation of the upper arm is the fastest motion produced by the human body. That fact alone should change how we look at the skeletons of early humans. The old consensus treated tool-making as the central event, as though the mind became modern when stone met stone. But a thrown stone also demanded selection, judgment, and training. Not every rock is a weapon. A broken chunk with sharp corners flies badly. A flat piece tumbles unpredictably. A rounded stone, dense enough to carry force and small enough to grip, becomes something different. It can be selected, carried, cached and thrown. At cave sites and open-air localities, rounded stones have often been noticed because they seem too convenient, too deliberately gathered, too clustered in places where they do not always belong geologically. The mystery is not that early humans encountered stones. The mystery is that certain stones look like they were chosen because the hand and shoulder already knew what they were for. A rounded stone thrown by an animal with poor mechanics is an annoyance. A rounded stone thrown by Homo erectus from elevated ground is a weapon. Great elevation changes everything. Gravity adds speed. The target receives not only the force of the arm, but the falling path of the projectile. A stone launched downward from a cave entrance, a ridge, or a riverbank arrives with extra energy, and the thrower gains safety from the animal below. This is where the comparison to a baseball mound becomes more than a modern analogy. Pitchers throw from a raised surface because the downward angle and forward stride help the body deliver velocity. Early humans did not need a built mound. The landscape already gave them one. A slope above a game trail, a ledge above a watering hole, a cave terrace above open ground. These were natural throwing platforms. Against prey, this mattered enormously. A stone did not need to kill a large animal instantly to change the outcome of a hunt. It could break concentration, injure a limb, strike the skull, stun, separate one animal from the herd, or force movement toward waiting hunters. Against smaller animals, it could kill directly. Against medium animals, it could disable. Against large animals, it could harass, direct, and weaken. In a world before advanced hunting gear, control mattered as much as penetration. A group that could throw accurately from a safe position had a way to influence animal movement without closing immediately into claw, horn, or tooth range. The throw was distance turned into power. It created a new tactical space between hunter and prey. Against predators, the same ability changed the balance of fear. Early humans lived among hyenas, big cats, crocodiles, giant eagles, and other hunters that were stronger in direct combat. But a predator approaching a carcass or a sleeping place faced a different calculation if several upright hominids stood together with stones. A thrown rock to the face, ribs, or legs is not symbolic. It hurts, it blinds, it warns, it creates risk. Predators are not machines, they weigh danger. A carcass defended by several humans hurling stones from a raised position becomes costly. A cave mouth protected by a rain of rocks becomes harder to enter. The famous weakness of early humans starts to look different. They lacked fangs, but they gained reach. They lacked claws, but they gained acceleration. They lacked the body of a lion, but they turned the landscape into a weapon. In any case, the evolution of throwing cannot be separated from longer legs. Long legs are usually discussed in terms of walking and running, and rightly so, because Homo erectus moved across larger territories than earlier hominids. But long legs also increase stride length, improve weight transfer, and provide a powerful base for rotation. A throw begins at the ground. The planted foot halts forward motion just enough for the hips and torso to whip around it. The body becomes a lever system. A short, crouched body can throw, but it cannot create the same long kinetic chain. A taller body with longer legs, a narrow waist and mobile torso can separate hip rotation from chest rotation. And that separation is the beginning of high-speed throwing. This is where upper body mechanics become decisive. The human waist is not the stiff trunk of a chimpanzee. It allows the pelvis and ribcage to move with a degree of independence. That independence lets the body store rotational energy. The shoulder is also different. A laterally facing shoulder joint allows the upper arm to align with torso rotation in a way that improves the loading of the throw. Low humeral torsion, meaning the orientation of the upper arm bone, allows more external rotation at the shoulder, lets the arm reach farther back during cocking. The elbow, bent at the critical moment, increases resistance so that the arm lags behind the rotating torso. This lag stretches the shoulder structures. Then the elbow straightens and the system unloads. The body is not merely pushing the projectile, it is casting it from a biological spring. That was where things stood in the earliest phase, stones, bodies, terrain, and repeated practice. But the next great step in the story was the Acheulean handaxe, and here the mystery deepens. The Acheulean handaxe is normally presented as a cutting tool, a butchering tool, a display object, or a general-purpose implement. It certainly served many roles, but its shape also raises a question that has never quite gone away. Many handaxes are balanced, symmetrical, pointed, and heavy enough to cause terrible injury at short range. Some are too large or elaborate for simple cutting tasks, and others have shapes that invite a grip, haft, wrap, or handle-based solution. A bare handaxe is dangerous to hold tightly in a chaotic struggle. A handaxe attached to a handle becomes a different object, a chopping weapon, a thrusting weapon, a close-range striking tool, and a bridge between the thrown stone and the spear. The handle question is difficult because wood and bindings vanish across deep time. Stone survives and creates an illusion that stone was the whole tool. But in real life, stone is often only the durable part. A heavy biface fixed into a wooden handle, even crudely, would transform the human arm into a lever with a hard cutting edge at the end. Against prey, this could finish an injured animal. Against predators, it could punish a close approach. Against other human groups, it would be terrifying. The Acheulean world was not only a world of hunting, it was a world of territories, carcasses, water sources, shelter, mating competition, and memory. Groups encountered one another. They competed, they signalled, they threatened. And if thrown stones created distance, handled handaxes created danger at the boundary where distance collapsed. Something in the Acheulean handaxe hints at this dual nature. It is beautiful, but it is not gentle. It is carefully shaped, but it is not merely decorative. The pointed end concentrates force. The broad base allows control. The edges punish flesh. The weight carries momentum. A handaxe in the hand is one kind of tool. A handaxe on a handle is another. And even without permanent hafting, temporary wrapping, wedging, or seating into split wood would be within the cognitive and manual abilities of people already shaping stone with precision. The same mind that selected a round throwing stone could select a biface for balance. The same hand that learned release timing could learn leverage. The same body that drove a stone through space could drive a handled edge downward at short range. Indeed, human throwing evolution is not a simple line from rock to spear. It is a widening tactical system. Rounded stones gave distance. Acheulean axes gave close-range force. Wooden spears gave reach, penetration, and the ability to combine throwing mechanics with hunting strategy. By the time of the famous wooden spears from Schöningen in Germany, around 300,000 years ago, the technology had reached a remarkable level. These were not crude sticks grabbed in panic. They were carefully shaped wooden weapons, balanced in a way that invited comparison with javelins. They show that humans, long before Homo sapiens, possessed planning, woodworking skill, knowledge of material properties, and a practical understanding of flight. They also show that throwing was no longer only a stone-based behavior. It had entered the age of aerodynamic weapons. The Schöningen spears matter because wood changes the physics. A stone transfers blunt force. A spear delivers force through a point. A thrown spear can penetrate, cut, lodge, and bleed. It can strike from beyond the reach of hooves or horns. It can be hurled in groups, from cover across short distances, or from elevated positions. And again, raised ground matters. A spear thrown downward from a ridge, bank, or slope gains a more lethal path. Gravity assists the weapon. The point enters at an angle. The thrower remains above the danger zone. Like the baseball mound, elevation improves delivery, but in a hunting scene the stakes are life and death. A group above a herd could throw into animals moving below, turning terrain into force multiplication. The common image of early spear hunting often shows humans standing flat on open ground, throwing straight across space at large animals. That picture is too simple. Real hunters think in terrain. They notice slopes, ravines, marsh edges, narrow passes, river crossings, and places where animals slow down. A spear thrown from above into a horse, deer, or large herbivore gives the hunter an advantage that flat ground cannot provide. The animal below has less opportunity to charge uphill quickly. The spear travels with a downward component. The thrower can retreat behind rocks, trees, or other members of the group. The weapon is not isolated from the setting. The weapon and the terrain operate together. Now consider this from the viewpoint of intergroup conflict. Once humans became skilled throwers, every encounter between groups changed. Distance was no longer safe. A human standing across a ravine above a trail or near a cave entrance could injure another human without closing into hand-to-hand struggle. Rounded stones could be stockpiled, spears could be carried, handled axes could dominate close quarters. The human body itself had become a weapons platform, and that fact shaped social life. Cooperation inside the group became more valuable because coordinated throwing increased the danger to outsiders and predators alike. At the same time, conflict between groups became more dangerous because a skilled thrower could injure before contact. The evolution of throwing was not only about food, it was about territory, defense, intimidation, and survival. Every resolution has made early humans harder to place, not easier. They were not simply scavengers, yet not fully modern hunters in the later sense. They were not helpless, yet not invincible. They occupied an unstable middle ground, where anatomy, stone, wood, and landscape created new possibilities. Their bodies were shaped by walking, running, climbing less, carrying more, fighting predators, competing with other humans, and hunting animals that were often bigger, faster, and stronger. Throwing sits at the center of that transformation because it links so many of these pressures together. It explains why a tall waist matters. It explains why long legs matter. It explains why shoulder orientation matters. It explains why selected stones in caves matter. It explains why a handaxe is not easily reduced to one purpose. It explains why a wooden spear from Germany feels less like an isolated invention and more like the visible tip of a much older system. The deeper you look, the more the throwing story overturns the comfortable idea that human evolution was mainly about brains becoming larger, while bodies simply followed. The body changed in ways that made new behavior possible, and behavior then intensified selection on the body. A better thrower could defend a carcass. A better thrower could strike prey from safer distance. A better thrower could stand on raised ground and dominate the space below. A better thrower could protect sleeping places and challenge rivals. Over time, skill became culture. Children watched adults. Young hunters practiced with stones. Groups learned which rocks flew true, which slopes gave advantage, which animals turned when struck, which predators backed away, which enemies advanced despite warning. The motion became embodied knowledge long before anyone could explain the mechanics. Anyway, this is what makes the story so powerful. A stone at a cave site is easy to dismiss. A handaxe is easy to classify. A spear is easy to place in a museum case, but together they form a sequence of human capability that begins with selection, grows through biomechanics, and ends in strategy. The rounded rock in the hand, the Acheulean axe on a possible handle, and the Schöningen spear crossing open air are not separate chapters. They are connected moments in the evolution of distance, force, and control. They show the human body learning to extend itself beyond skin and bone. They show danger being pushed outward, from the tooth to the hand, from the hand to the stone, from the stone to the spear, and from the spear into the landscape itself. In the end, the mystery is not whether humans learned to throw. The mystery is how early that ability began shaping everything else. Once a body can throw with speed and accuracy, the world changes around it. A cave entrance becomes a defensive position, a slope becomes a weapon, a riverbank becomes a hunting station, a pile of rounded stones becomes a warning, a carved wooden spear becomes the final expression of a much older motion. And somewhere in that long passage from vulnerable primate to armed hunter, the human shoulder became a spring, the legs became a launch system, the torso became a rotating engine, and the hand became the last link in a chain of force that began under the feet. Thank you for watching. And the next time you see a simple rounded stone sitting quietly on the ground, consider the possibility that the first great human weapon did not look like a weapon at all.